Everyone's pointing fingers at Trump, but no one seems to care that Biden's handlers and Antifa agitators are walking free. Why is accountability a one-way street? Blaze News The Mandate starts right now. Welcome in, everyone. I'm Jill Savage, joined by Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson.
Beautiful day in the neighborhood here in Dallas.
And our D.C. correspondent, Chris Bedford. Is it beautiful there, Chris, right now? I know you guys had big thunderstorms last night.
It's awesome. I mean, it's like in the mid-70s, and it's cloudy. There's no sun there. And otherwise, I'd be getting sunburned right now. It's cooler, but the sun comes out. It gets hotter and hotter.
That's the way it works in summer, Bedford. I hate to disappoint you. Speaking of being disappointed, right? Like we know everybody this week, we're a little sad about the Epstein files, right? But let's look at the other active conspiracy that's at hand this week, right? We know the Democrats put a dementia patient in the White House for 4 years. But yesterday, Joe Biden's White House physician invoked his Fifth Amendment right when he was testifying on Biden's condition when he was in office.
On the advice of counsel, I must respectfully decline to answer based on the physician-patient privilege and reliance on my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. I am not a lawyer, and I must follow my lawyer's advice in this matter.
So, gentlemen, we intend to assert both privileges with regard to any questions that would be asked at this deposition. And Dr. O'Connor will not answer any questions.
That's coming out the gate pretty hot, Chris. It seems like there's a lot of people that are willing to just go out there and cover up Biden's declining health. We saw it for so long until, of course, a couple of the journalists wanted to go out there and write the book. And then they told a little bit of the truth. But now we're reverting back to our old ways. So what do we see here with Dr. O'Connor and just saying, you know what, I'm pleading the fifth?
You know, and the reason why he's worried about the truth is not because we don't already know what was going on, essentially, but because he's liable. He could be charged. You think of this, you hear, patient-client privilege, patient-doctor privilege. That's the sort of thing that makes sense. That's what I have with my doctor. But this is different. He's a military officer tasked to the White House. His job is to be able to report back to the cabinet if necessary, or to answer to any of the other constitutional oversights of the president's ability to actually perform the duties of head of state, including the Congress. So if he's lying and he's not doing that, that's a serious issue for him. That's something that they need to actually get to the bottom of. But there was more to it. He pled the fifth for everything in that testimony. I actually watched everything that was released, which is about 20 minutes. He pled the fifth to whether or not he understood how this hearing was going to work. He pled the fifth to whether or not he understood that he had to give verbal answers and couldn't just nod or shake his head so the stenographer could write it down. He pled the fifth to, hey, by the way, if you need any clarity on anything, if you don't understand a question, please ask. He pled the fifth to, here's what perjury is, just so you're aware. It's not just lying. It's also not telling the whole truth or obscuring aspects of the truth that you know when the question leads to those answers. And then he pled the fifth to some actually pretty interesting stuff. Like, were you ever told by anyone what to do when you're with regards to your analysis and your diagnoses that you released publicly on President Joe Biden? Were you ever aware or suspicious that the president was lacking in the mental capacity to actually be the head of state? These are things he also pled the fifth to, and that's kind of a dangerous, serious thing. And that there's reason for it because his lawyers know he's in deep trouble. And here's the thing I wrote in my emergency Beltway brief out today is that he's not the top target. He is basically the mob doctor. You get the mob doctor, you know that they're operating illegally, you threaten their medical license, you threaten some prison time, but the person you're actually after are the people who that mob doctor treated. You want to roll up with an investigation. Start with the people you have publicly, and you put them on a place where they squirm. And Dr. O'Connor was not feeling the love during that meeting. You make them feel threatened. You put out a brave public face, which to his credit, Oversight Chairman James Comer has really been doing. so far. He has taken a tough public stance. And you say, listen, we're going to use the Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro precedent set very recently by the last Congress, where we are going to hold you accountable. We're going to put people in prison for contempt of Congress, and we're going to fine them. There will be results if you refuse to help Congress in its lawful and constitutional oversight of what was actually happening in this White House. But then you whisper to them on the side, or we could cut a deal. We could give you blanket immunity, or we could give you a more targeted kind of immunity where what you testify will not be used against you. But if the government finds something on its own that you don't volunteer, well, then that's another matter entirely. And you use that to try and get who were those people, if anyone, who told you not to put forward a truthful report? Who were those people? When did you actually become aware of this? All of those, pleading the fifth isn't necessarily a guilty plea, of course. It's certainly not, but it certainly isn't a good look. It makes me think, and I think everyone else think, that there's certainly something more to what was going on here. The Biden White House claims that it was a very carefully guarded secret, but how carefully was it guarded, and what laws were broken, what statutes were broken, what truths were bet in the pursuit of that? Those are the things that Congress has to focus on now.
Yeah, these are very simple questions to ask or to answer and address. I look at this and
We're
just say,
asking questions.
That's all we're doing. We're just asking questions, right? Do you believe that the president was fit to, I don't know, be the president? I'm looking at this and I'm like, I wouldn't even let him be like the CEO of our company, the Blaze. Like, he's not even fit to do that yet.
Definitely
Matt,
not.
he was out there as the commander in chief. He's the leader of the free world. And something that we should point out is that the first time that we know that the auto pen was used was 5 days into the Biden presidency. So this isn't something that was a long drawn out period like Joe started with maybe something, a couple marbles still up there in the head. No, we were using the auto pen right away, straight out of the gate for this.
Yeah, look, 2020, this was clear in 2020 to the audience. This was the silly thing about this is that media is so powerful that we have to even argue about it in our own heads right now. It was clear the guy had lost a step and he was starting to lose it, 4 years ago to everyone and their mother in the audience, but that became a right-left sort of talking point. So we hope that this guy, does turn state's evidence as under the pressure, as Chris is saying. I'll believe it all when I see it. But I just want to add the very important point as editor-in-chief here, as some wag on Twitter pointed out. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The doctor looks like the love child of Stephen King and Dwight Schrute from The Office. It's unbelievable. It's uncanny.
He's not blessed with comeliness. And he's really not very. Pictures of him next to Joe Biden. Joe Biden's like twice his size.
Yeah.
But
it's like, where did you find this guy? But he's. How much pressure is he really under? Because of course we've seen. Who made the point the other day? It used to be a big thing that you got pulled in front of Congress. Oh, Congress, you're going to have to go talk in front of Congress. Does anyone really care these days? Because I see lots of people get pulled in front of Congress, and I don't see much happen afterwards.
So here's how you knew this hearing was more serious. The way you could, the key to being able to tell if something's actually serious with Congress and if you're in real trouble is if it's private. That's one key, because then people aren't just glad standing and hoping for tweets and viral moments and just yelling at the witnesses. They're actually trying to get answers. And the main thing is if the congressmen step aside and put forward their counsels, or the actual policy experts that they have on their staff to lead the questioning. We saw that, for example, with some of the Supreme Court nominations that we had, those battles that Republicans had to fight versus Democrats. And you saw that in this hearing where it was essentially chaired by the head counsel for the chairman of the majority of the committee, a lawyer. That's how you know, all right, now I'm in actual trouble here. This is going to be a serious hearing. Of course, we don't get anything, to your point, out of so many of these oversight hearings. But if they're serious about this and they use the actual mechanisms of power that they have to unravel this, then it could go significantly higher than this White House doctor.
Well, and let's remember, it's a long list of problems that Joe Biden was facing when it was coming to all of his health concerns. He was diagnosed with cancer after he left office, and everybody was saying, "Well,
was he?
that was a situation that at that stage of cancer, I believe it was stage 4." You would have been able to figure that out while he was in the White House as the president of the United States. And you can't tell me that some of the best doctors from, that are right there trying to help the president wouldn't have done any of these normal basic cancer tests for a man that was his age.
Yeah, I mean, it would be like, I mean, imagine the dereliction of duty there, right? I mean, any significant doctor, any serious doctor would lose clients if they didn't catch stage 4, just didn't know it. I mean, he's just an old doddering man who's president of the United States. Who cares?
Chris, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, and he supposedly has the top medical testing and care of any person in the United States because it's so incredibly important. It's literally a constitutional duty to make sure that this person is okay and that this person is functioning. That's one thing I've learned about cancer treatments in general. And you always wonder, how did this not get caught before now? Well, our healthcare system doesn't actually automatically just test for it. You have to pay special services and send in vials of blood to get the actual proper screenings to catch a lot of the stuff, separate sometimes even from your doctor. But that's not something that applies to President Joe Biden, to someone who obviously is suffering from health issues, who's got difficulty maintaining his focus. These are the sorts of things that they would have been testing for. So that's the cancer diagnosis is another specific aspect where I'd be curious about finding out who knew what, who decided then, if they did know it, that it wasn't going to come out, it wasn't going to be disclosed, it wasn't going to be told to the cabinet, it wasn't going to be told to the Congress. It was a major scandal when the Secretary of Defense hid a surgery that he was actually out for. I mean, remember when George W. Bush had to be put under near the end of his second term, Dick Cheney was given formally the power of president for a short period of time. And unfortunately, he didn't use it for all the awesome things he should have. He should have pardoned Scooter Libby, just right there. Like, I'm the president, boom, done. Oh, sorry, George, our relationship's done anyways. But he didn't do that. He just performed his duties. Richard Nixon under Dwight Eisenhower was president for a short period of time when the president was incapacitated. This is something that has a precedent. This is something that's supposed to be done. And in this case, all systems didn't fail. They were intentionally, the levers were not pulled.
Well, the lies are going to continue in D.C. We know that much for sure. We know that some bourbon chase trends, but Flying Ace chases legacy. This is straight bourbon the way that it was meant to be. Bold, balanced, and unapologetically American. There's no fluff or gimmicks. It's just real whiskey made for people who still believe in hard work and high standards and actually doing things the right way. Whether you're winding down after a long day or raising a glass with good company, Flying Ace delivers every single time. And it's not about the hype. It's about heritage and getting back to what bourbon was always supposed to be. Now, if this sounds like you're kind of poor, then it's time to level up. Buy online at flyingacespirits.com and use the code BLAZE for free shipping. Let's go ahead and turn our attention over to the ICE facilities, because over the last week, they've been targeted by violent left-wing activists. 2 of them were in Texas. 1 of them was in Portland. But the headlines have been using words like attack and ambush to describe the incidents instead of a more fitting term like domestic terrorism. Let's go ahead and look at SOT 2, the Antifa attacks there in the Portland ICE facility. Guys, they want you to believe that's just, it's just a little ambush. It's just a little attack. But when we come to all of these phrases that are being used, we know that the media spins this all the time for, no, we're going to protect our own. We're not going to go out there and say that whatever is happening that we kind of maybe want to have happen. No, that's not, we can't use the words like domestic terrorism. They'll protect them, Matt.
Yeah, this has been percolating for a long time. And in case you wondered, what kind of horrors would be drug up by the left when they didn't immediately riot and take to the streets after Trump came in, this is it. And it's actually alarming. It's a serious thing, because what we've seen so far are not just the Antifa lunatics, shooting their fireworks off and all that. Although notice in the video that they are actually being accosted by law enforcement, which is a great thing. We've seen tamping down on the riots. We haven't seen, the level of the BLM stuff. There's been some stuff that's happened, right? Everyone knows about LA, but there's one theory that this is all just revving down. The spirit isn't there anymore to actually do it. But the alarming thing is these planned attacks, when you're actually trying to assassinate federal officials, as happened in Texas. That stuff is not going away. And the language that these people are using, that even Karen Bass is using in LA, is very much as if like California is not part of America. It's a rejection of federal authority wholesale. And so you have that language on the one hand, and then you have these increasingly planned attacks that look like something new, to be honest, something we haven't seen in some time in America, really probably since the 1970s. So I think we're going to keep an eye on that. As the country turns, there's a vibe shift. There's a lot of people in the middle who just don't care anymore, it appears. But there's also a significant contingent of Democrats and people on the left who are getting exceedingly violent and riotous. And this is something, of course, this is the kind of domestic terrorism that the FBI pretended that they were going after for decades, the last decade on the right. And, I hope to God that they're going to go after it on the left this time.
Let's go ahead and double down on the leftist rhetoric. Let's go ahead and look at SOT 3. DHS Secretary Mayorkas was actually going out there and saying, the greatest threat is domestic terrorism.
And what we in the Department of Homeland Security have assessed is that the greatest terrorism-related threat that we face in the homeland is the threat of domestic violent extremism. Individuals drawn to violence because of ideologies of hate or false narratives propagated on social media and other online platforms.
Now, Chris, that sounds great, but the only problem with it is that when you hear Mayorkas say domestic terror, they're talking about those Catholics that go to church and Latin Mass and everything else that we've seen that has been weaponized. The government has been weaponized against the American people. They're not talking about the incidents that we're talking about here, and therein lies the problem.
Yeah, it does. Although that speech triggered me from back as an intern when I had to cover DHS solely, and that was the tenor of basically every speech I ever went to. It was so hard to stay awake during some of those early days. But it's such a what do they call it? Gaslighting of the American people when we've now lived through 10 years plus, no, even longer than that, of violent left-wing extremism in the United States. I mean, remember when Black Lives Matter came back on the scene in 2020 and people acted like, what is this new movement of people who are just trying to save lives? So these are the same guys who opened up fire as a sniper on police in Texas and killed multiple officers. This is the exact same organization and group of people. Well, not all the same people, and I guess they didn't have the same nonprofit status, but they called themselves Black Lives Matter. This was a group that was in very recent history. And they tried to just go over that. When there are different attacks that clearly are politically motivated or sometimes terror motivated, the FBI of the Obama years and the Biden years would throw up its hands and say, I guess we'll never know the motivation behind this violence. Yeah, we do. It's really obvious. They're wearing banners. They're wearing flags. Like the guy who tried to take a shot at President Trump at the golf course. It was pretty clear what his motivations were. It's not a huge mystery. But Matt's right. This is a really dangerous escalation. And thank God for the safety of the police officers that these Antifa guys who were kitted out in tactical gear, who had weapons, who had guns, weren't very good at using them and scattered. Because if that group had been better trained and actually able to use them and bring the deadly force that they brought with them to bear, that would have been a very, very different episode. And at the same time, and here in Washington, D.C., you've got Democrats saying, we want to make it so that these agents can't protect their identities anymore. When there are radicals going around with leaflets trying to print the faces of different agents, who are federal agents, That's seditious activity. That's dangerous activity. It's targeting of these police officers personally for the duties that they're carrying out in their official capacity within the laws of the United States passed by our Congress and upheld by our courts. And they're being targeted by Democrats amid this violence because they're so confident that their friends in corporate media will hide this, will bury it, will use these words like, oh, it was a brawl, it was an attack, as opposed to what it really was, that they don't actually have to answer for trying to provide backing behind them at the same time. And by the way, where are the cities coming out, speaking of unmasking, and saying you can't wear masks anymore? I'm sorry, I just do not believe that the group of 16-year-old kids walking through D.C. in a 95-degree day are wearing balaclavas because they want to protect themselves from COVID. They're thieving. They're committing crimes. And when I moved to D.C., there was a law against covering your face in public. It was an anti-masking law. Cities across the country had those before COVID, and now people use them as just a way to protect their identity while they target police officers, and Democrats try to remove the masks from police officers who are being targeted by them. It's a situation where Democrats have become so lost on this that they are backing up the violence because they don't know what to do peacefully anymore.
Yeah, and you throw onto this the fact that you see this, the USAID and former State Department employees who are pissed off, who are bragging about the fact that we were paid to create, revolution in other countries, and now, you made a big mistake because we're all going to do that here. So there's no apology from these people, and you do have a lot of people who the left created this activism core who are now going to turn their attention methodically to federal agents and federal facilities that are trying to enforce immigration law. So there's no doubt that this continues, and I don't know how large it will be, but it's the fact that what we've seen are very precise plans, right, to assassinate members of the federal government. So, I mean, you're exactly right. This has been going on for a while. People have pretended it's not here. What we want to see from the federal government now is acknowledgement, and we have seen some of that already, that this is domestic terrorism, as Jill says, and that we systematically go after these people.
Final thoughts, Chris?
And meanwhile, the unarmed rioters at the Capitol are considered a violent and serious President Trump-backed coup. That's the level. And by the way, though, the January 6th prosecution opened the path, like Democrats have opened the path on so many different things, to actually what an FBI that is serious will look like when it goes after these organizations, these terrorist organizations domestically. And I hope and I think that this administration has the cojones to actually use those precedents to go after these deadly, violent terrorists.
Chris Bedford, of course, is talking about January 6th because he knows exactly what's coming up next on the show. Chris, thanks so much for your time.
I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, we'll see you then. But when we come back, it will be time for J6. Joe Hanneman will join us right after this. Real quick, before we get back to the show, we need to talk about the ranchers in this country. Don't let them down and just go out there because all the grocery store meat is coming from overseas. You need to support American workers and American family farms. You've heard me say it. 85% of the so-called grass-fed beef that's in stores is actually imported. That's why you need to look at goodranchers.com because they sell only 100% American meat. It's all born, raised, and harvested right here in the United States on local family farms, and it tastes really good. It's summertime. We know there's nothing better than grilling with your friends and family. You could choose, all the steaks and burgers, chicken, wild-caught seafood. They have everything, and you'll be able to taste the difference. Plus, every box is going to support American ranchers. So right now, if you subscribe, you'll get your pick of free meat for life. You can pick between Wagyu burgers, hot dogs, bacon, or wings in every box. And when you use the code Jill, you'll get an extra $40 off at checkout. It's goodranchers.com, code Jill. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. The media might have been okay pouring cold water on the ICE facility attacks, but they were more than happy to put the spotlight on January 6th. Now, strangely, no one's talking about the fact that the D.C. Metro is refusing to release their use of force reports from that day. So why do we have all this secrecy? Let's go ahead and bring in Blaze News investigative reporter Joe Hanneman, who wrote about this for theblaze.com, and he joins us right now. So, Joe, there are a lot of FOIA requests for J6, so let's dive into this latest one that you filed against the department back in May and what it means.
Yeah, I had a suggestion made to me by a retired member from MPD who said this would be a good source of information. Of course, there was huge crowds at the Capitol that day. There were many, many hundreds of Metro PD officers, and there were some problems with overuse of force. And we were looking to see just exactly how the department analyzed that. Now, they are supposed to keep an officer is supposed to make a report of any use of force, whether it's drawing their weapon or using an asp against someone, a riot baton. And so, it was something I wanted to see how they analyzed it and see if that matched up against the video evidence that we have of all these various incidents that day. So, and this has been, a policy MPD has had for a long time. It's a standard thing in most departments to document uses of force. So I guess I wasn't surprised because I have yet to have MPD actually give me anything when I request things via FOIA, but they should. This is clearly something that's in the public interest.
So what is their excuse is that this is they're law enforcement sensitive, quote unquote?
And that's the first time I've seen that term used in a FOIA context. We saw that a lot in January 6th prosecutions. That's a way that the FBI used. It was like an internal label in terms of restricting access to it. It really doesn't have any sort of legal weight to it. So for them to use that, and that term, it doesn't show up anywhere in the DC code. So I think that was just their excuse to throw that out there, that it may be sensitive if it shows something and shows an officer doing something wrong, certainly, but that does not mean the public shouldn't have access to it.
So how does this piece of the puzzle fit in just to the overall January 6th narrative, right? We're still trying to recreate everything that happened on that day.
Right. And there, we had some very serious uses of force by Metropolitan Police, but also Capitol Police. But I would have to say, in the balance, more in terms of Metro PD, which came in large numbers to help back up Capitol Police when the crowds overran the Capitol property. But we've had people that were shot with crowd control munitions in a totally inappropriate and probably illicit way, causing some serious bodily injury. We had Roseanne Boyland, who died that day, who was beaten with a walking stick by an MPD officer. And they've never accounted for any of these things. They haven't publicly commented. We have asked them to comment on them. They have declined. So nowhere have they told the public, this is how we analyze this, and this is why we didn't discipline this officer for striking a woman who was not only unconscious, but probably did not have a pulse, striking her in the head, in the face with a very hard object.
Yeah. So what happens next here? I mean, we just keep pushing. Because this sounds ridiculous. I mean, law enforcement sensitive, by the way. I can't get over that phrase. Law enforcement sensitive. Like you said, no crap, it's sensitive to you guys, but let's stop being sensitive and give us the information. How do we push them further?
And like so many things in DC, whether it's the Capitol Police or Metropolitan Police, their policy seems to be, we will give you nothing unless you sue us. And so I did send this information over to Judicial Watch, to Tom Fitton. This is the kind of thing that, nobody really has the track record that they do in terms of forcing government to cough up public interest information. So, if they see merit in that on their own, I certainly think that would be helpful, because when it comes to J6, Judicial Watch has really been the champion of grabbing information from Metro and releasing it to the public, whether it's the shooting of Ashley Babbitt or any number of other incidents. So having an organization like that champion it, but also just to keep filing things so we make a record and and appeal them if they deny them, which they, at least in my experience, they always do.
Well, let's go back to J6 protester. You were talking about this with me earlier today, Mark Griffin, right? He was a J6 protester that was severely injured by authorities, and he's still out there trying to seek justice. So can you give us an update on this?
Yeah, Mark was at the police line on the West Front on January 6th, and he went there. He wanted to talk to the police. So he spent a good half hour or so just explaining why he was there. He had to get out his driver's license and show it to an officer and say, I'm from Pennsylvania, and this is why I'm here. We have questions about the election. Our legislature has questions about this is the 2020 presidential election. And eventually, the police line moved around a little bit with, the Metro pushed the barricades back. But at one point, he was talking to some officers, and one came up through the crowd who was carrying a crowd control munition launcher. And he raised it and he fired it probably 24 inches from Mark's leg, and point blank hit him with a shell that had 3 hard rubber baton rounds in it, and struck his leg, and it split his femur from top to bottom. It was a massive injury, and he had multiple surgeries to repair it and lost a year of his life. He did file suit against the officer and against the department, but the DC judge said that he can't sue the officer. She was claiming that the statute of limitations had expired, even though the suit was filed the day before the statute of limitations ran out. But they did not know the name of the officer until more investigation was done. In fact, we were the ones who eventually identified the shooter as Sergeant Frank Edwards. But so he had a big setback in that. And right now, I think his best hope for help is perhaps from the U.S. Attorney in D.C. To take a look at that and see if this constitutes some sort of an assault by the officer. That statute of limitations would go a little bit longer. So, but in terms of monetary compensation lawsuit, right now, I think he's pretty much out of luck.
That is unbelievable. Unbelievable. So this officer fires, his femur is fractured. He's out for a year, and he has had no justice, nothing from the government for this, other than saying, no, you can't sue. What's the likelihood that the U.S. Attorney takes this up?
Well, since the election and the change of the administrations, I would say it's improved greatly. Now, when Ed Martin was in as the acting U.S. Attorney, in fact, I had some discussion with him about some of these things, and he expressed a great interest in them. I don't know if Jeanine Pirro will be of the same mind, but there are a good handful of these very high-profile cases, and in all of them, the victims are not getting justice. They've tried suing either, pro se, representing themselves. That usually doesn't work out real well. Victoria White, who was beaten in the skull, in the face, just brutally beaten by a supervisor from Metropolitan Police Department. And she does have a suit that's ongoing, but it's an uphill slog. There aren't always attorneys that are willing to represent them because there's such a stigma attached to January 6th. There was a man who was pushed off of a second-story ledge, and he fell good 20 feet and absolutely just destroyed his ankle. And this was a marathon runner and a parachutist, and now he can't do any of those things because his ankle's destroyed. And he also filed suit, but I believe that one may have been tossed out. So it's the kind of thing that justice is probably going to have to come from the DOJ, which is ironic considering before the election, the previous DOJ was the one doing the persecuting of a lot of these people.
Right. Well, Joe, before we let you go, we can't not ask about the Minnesota shooter and the latest on what's going on there. You did some great work reporting on this for Blaze. I encourage everyone to go read those articles. But what's going on with our friend Vance now?
Well, he was in court again just before July 4th. He had waived the preliminary hearing. He also waived his detention hearing. So in response to that, the judge found probable cause that he committed the offenses that are charged, 6 felony counts, and ordered that he would be held in custody until trial. And so the next step after that is this will be, if it's not as we speak, before a grand jury in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And the grand jury will take a look at this. I suspect they will issue more than 6 charges against him. I don't know what they might be, but if there possibly be some terrorism-related charges or enhancers, that will be interesting to note. But I would expect within a week, we're going to see a grand jury indictment be issued, and then things will start to proceed towards trial.
Joe Hanneman, truly one of the best that we have. Go read his work at theblaze.com. Thanks so much for your time, Joe.
Thank you.
Matt, I want to just continue on with the investigations that we do, because let me mansplain to you for a second. Nobody else out there is still covering January 6th, right? You have to go to Blaze Media and Blaze News to get the actual stories. And you can see here, people like Joe are still putting in the time and the effort, putting in all of these requests, trying to get to the bottom of this, because we know the American people aren't done with it, but the uniparty is the uniparty for a reason. There's a reason why they don't want us to know all of these answers.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Thank you for explaining.
Yes.
Women-splaining, is that a thing? I don't know. I tried to explain mansplaining, to my wife. She didn't listen.
Yeah.
So I think that this is key to what we do. And Joe Hanneman is a good example of this. This is someone who really spent a lot of time for some years before coming to Blaze. I mean, obviously years in journalism, but was following these stories at Epic Times at the time, his former employer. And Steve Baker, of course, similarly. And the point is, just like the American people, justice needs to be served here. And these stories are also just compelling. I mean, I want to do more of telling these stories, not less, because like we just heard, this case of Mark Griffin, these stories are compelling. It's shameful what happened. People do still care, and we want to see justice. And we're not going to see justice unless people in the media like us continue telling these stories. So it's really important stuff. And it's not only January 6th, right? There's a number of other investigations. I mean, the whole Representative Corey Mills story is not over by a long shot. It's unbelievable, the world in which we live and the people in Congress and what they're like. These are all important things that we take selective shots at. When we do take a shot at it, we don't stop. We go all the way. And that's why it's so great to be here with all of you.
Well, you can't, because if you do, then, the government, are you going to really go out there and rely on the government to tell you the truth and give you all the answers? Of course you're not. When we come back, we're going to get your answers and your replies on who you actually trust in the government, because I have a feeling, Matt, it's probably going to be a pretty short list. We'll get to that next. Well, trust and respect are 2 things that you must earn, and there's been a lack of faith in our institutions lately. I think that might be an understatement, but that's why I posted on X. Is there anyone in the government that you trust? Who stands out to you? Let's go ahead and get to some of your replies. Smith DK4 wrote, Thomas Massie, I disagree with him all you want, but he stands on principle much more than the other reps. And the 2023 me would never believe that I would ever say this, but John Fetterman. It would take some more movement by him for me to vote for him, but the respect level is high. 2023 me would not have believed that either. I think that when we go through and look at it, that is one of the crazier points that has happened in the political landscape over the last few years. But a lot of people love Thomas Massie.
Yeah, I think what this person is saying is, respects Fetterman and Massie just because they say what they want. They don't fit with any one narrative, which I think is a good sign, an indicator of someone you can trust, but not necessarily sufficient to fully trust them. But I think people like Massie and like Fetterman because they see them breaking with their party and just saying whatever they want, and that makes them seem authentic.
I should say the top vote getters were absolutely no one, Donald Trump, and a few others. Lively 175 actually says a lot of them, so let's go ahead and get to this one. Until I'm shown evidence to convince me otherwise, Chip Roy, Thomas Massie, and Ron DeSantis are some of the only government officials that I currently trust. Chip Roy's name was in there a lot as well.
Well, Congressman Roy is out there, saying what he thinks a lot. Again, he's a very strong voice. So I think people appreciate that. They appreciate the fact that he's out there, speaking with bold opinions. And that's something that strikes people as, more trustworthy than not in this day and age.
Let's go ahead and wrap it up with Concerned Face wrote, Tulsi, I followed her. I read her books and other writings and believe that she's doing the best she can. J.D. Vance, he's intelligent, he's a great thinker, and he's done things that I don't agree with overall, but I believe that he has got a heart for the country. And he finally says, Pete Hegseth read the book, The Battle for the American Mind, and watching him, he has to walk a bit of the tightrope, but he's still doing it right now with style. So a good group to round out the replies today.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, these are all interesting figures, right? I mean, Vance, this super young VP candidate, not in the mold of former VP candidates on the right. Very interesting, intelligent, articulate. Tulsi, again, mold breaking, right? She's coming from the Democrats. Very interesting views that break the mold on foreign policy for the right. I mean, these are the kinds of people that are, you gravitate towards. And I think there's trust there on the part of this person and others. With DeSantis, DeSantis broke the mold for governors, right? And just started doing things that you weren't allowed to do. So we are in a time where there are leaders who are doing something different, who aren't going along with each side's narrative, and they get attention at least. Whether you should trust them or not is another question. I'm very much in the I trust no one camp. When it really comes down to it, there's people, of course, I like and I take a bullet for, but I think trust has to be earned in this day and age.
Breaking the mold is absolutely necessary because look at what we had to deal with before, you guys. We didn't trust anybody out there, but it's interesting that they named Tulsi Gabbard there. We've talked about ODNI on this show every now and then. There's a task force. It's called the DIG, the Directors Initiative Group. And I think this is why Tulsi has earned some of the respect, right? Because they're going through and they actually at ODNI are polling people from all of the intel agencies. Okay, one from over here, one from over there. Now we have this little group that we're actually going to go through and look at what the rest of the intelligence community is doing. And right now they're going through and looking at the Russia hoax and the Hunter Biden stuff, election integrity. They have certain directive initiatives that President Trump has said, I want you guys to go in and focus on this because we talk about the deep state all the time, right? You can't always just trust what even all the intel people are doing because that's the deepest part of the deep state.
Yeah, God bless Tulsi in this group for doing it because it really is. When you come into these agencies, it's like taking over a pirate ship with your small band, and you're in the captain's quarters, and you got your first mate and your second mate, right? You got a handful of people in there, and everyone else on the ship that you're supposedly steering hates you and wants you off, wants to mutiny, and is against you. And that's the situation that she faces and that we all face throughout all the intelligence agencies. So anything that these people are doing, should be praised, protected, and may they succeed.
It's a tough ship to be on. I do not envy her whatsoever, because if you can only imagine how difficult that task must be at this point in time. But faith in institutions, right? It's part of the fourth turning, right? They ebb and they flow. We trust in government. We don't, just depending on like the generations and what time you were born. And man, if the fourth turning isn't just giving us some of the most exciting times to be alive, may you never have, may you live in interesting times. I feel like I would like it to be a little less interesting some days, because I think that, we've reached the peak of some of the interesting that I can take at some point. But then there are other days where I'm like, you know what? Bring it on. What else do you have to throw at us?
I think you like interesting things, you like interesting times somewhat, but it is true. It's not a good thing, right, to have institutions where no one trusts. And, for me, this really was, I'll say this every single show. 10 years ago or so, realizing that in a well-done study, the most widely feared thing in America was the corruption of government officials. And no one was talking about it. No one was talking about it. This is 2015, just before Trump. No one is talking about the fact that more than death of a loved one, natural disaster, nuclear weapons, the biggest, the most widely shared fear of all Americans was the corruption of government officials. And why? Because they sensed that they were living in 1930s Chicago all the time, and that these institutions were kind of clown world of DEI and people LARPing and toxic leadership and fake leadership, and that the credentials were the same way. They came from the fancy schools, but they didn't really know how to do anything, and the system was all sort of fake. And there's historical precedents for this. If you go back to Russia, to when Dostoevsky and these great Russian writers were writing, they describe a society that's very atheistic, has a large-scale bureaucracy where no one really cares about anything, and people are living these meaningless lives. And it's very similar in a way to modern America. So the interesting thing is that there's a rebellion against that Trump catalyzed, right? And some people in tech have helped, and others in this coalition, and they've been pushing ever since. And so you are getting to the point where most people feel this way at some level, and the people who don't, the people who are in denial, they're often upper middle class white, libs, or libs as I like to, but they're upper middle class like white libs who are desperately holding on to this system, and they don't want to see anything bad about it, and they want to blame everything bad on Donald Trump. So the point is, the faith in institutions is not going to be restored until some serious change happens. This is deep now into the American populace and the citizenry. They do not trust these institutions. The trust is still lessening. It's going down, not up still. It's not, the golden age is still doing with declining trust, right? Higher education was one of the last things that still had about 50% high trust. That's gone now. No one cares about the Ivy League schools. So that is going to continue, and it has to get worse before it gets better, and we build or reform new ones.
Well, some days I hope that it gets better very quickly. I know that it won't, because it's still a long, lengthy period that we have to go through, like you're saying. Now, George Washington is no longer with us, so you can't choose him. He's no longer living. So is there anyone that you would pick that you actually have faith in that is in the government right now?
Again, I'm trust but verify with everyone. People can change, but for different reasons. I would say I do have faith in Donald Trump. I do have faith in J.D. Vance. I think those two figures, right? Trump is living out his life. He might make mistakes, but everything he's doing right now is for the sake of reforming the country and living out the rest of his life, basically as a statesman, as a public servant. He's working 16-hour days. And he might not always get it right. There might be people around him who get it wrong and push him. But I have faith that he is now dedicated to the task of statesmanship. And I know all the people who would laugh at that, and they can go to hell. But this is just true. And then J.D. Vance, I think, is also, these people could always fall, but I think Vance is someone who's dedicated to the task at hand and has dedicated his life to it and is very promising.
Yeah, the man is a machine right now. Donald Trump is out there just producing results time and time and time again. I'll answer the question as an inverse. I will choose the field. Anybody else except for Representative Corey Mills. Let's just leave it at that, right? We know that we've caught him in so many lies already. So I'll just take, somebody else has to be better.
You people, Jill and our investigative team has told me stuff about Corey Mills that you wouldn't believe. But you will when these articles come out.
You will on a future episode. We'll tell you. We'll tell you what we know is coming up at the right amount of time, whenever that should come. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow.